Well, let's just do a little review. We talked.
When there's a break.
There you go. Yesterday, we were talking about the pathway of studying Scripture. And what I'm teaching you here comes out of a Bible study method that I developed while I was here. And I got kind of tired of all these out-of-context quotes that I would hear as a pastor. And these out-of-context quotes, I would try to straighten them out, and I realized they have a view of Scripture that is going to lead them to twist things out of context to their own devices because they haven't been trained. And let me say this clearly, the proof text method, the way it is done, is disastrous on text. It's disastrous for understanding. It's going to lead to misunderstanding because it's all out of context. And if you don't have a context, then you just use it for whatever you want it to mean, not what the writer meant and God through the writer, I believe. So there is a pathway, and I'm going to do that maybe next week. I know your time is busy, and I want to respect that, but I think these are important things that if you go away and you don't have this with you, you will miss a lot. So, yesterday we talked about when we study Scripture, we need to kind of have an understanding of what's going on with what's the situation. So this situational triangle, kind of a device it's kind of a device that I came up with that will help you kind of have a framework for understanding. And anytime you're going to try to understand what somebody says, you need to know the situation to which they're talking, what they're talking about, and why they're saying what they're saying. So in Genesis, the author is Moses, we said, and Moses, inspired by God, he's the author. On the second point is the audience, and the audience for Moses was post-Exodus Israelites, that is, Israelites who came out of the Egyptian bondage. And there were over 2,000 different gods, idols that is, representing gods, in Egypt, and for 20 generations plus, 20 generations, the Israelites were in Egypt. Every 20 years is a generation. They were in there 430 years. And in Egypt, 12 plus generations were as slaves. 12 plus generations were as slaves. And a slave is someone who does whatever their master's bidding is. They don't control anything in their life. Everything is governed by their master, including their influence of the gods. And 2,000 plus gods is a lot of gods. The Nile was a god. Snakes were gods. And that's why you understand when God delivered them, there's a battle of the gods going on when God brought the plagues on the gods of Egypt. Those were gods. The Nile was a god because water means life in the desert. And so what makes something a god? We said a god was something that has power over your life. Something that has power over your life. Well, 2,000 gods, that's a lot of power that is rife for problems. So, as we look at the situation, we realize they came out of Egypt, but Egypt came out of inside them. The view, the understanding. They're third parties to this situation. Now, third parties in this can be positive or negative. Positive third parties, well, God, but he's not really a third party. Negative were Pharaoh, right? He's a third party, and other nations that they encountered and had battles with. But because Moses was writing this after he brought them out of Egypt, I believe. Makes sense? He was dealing with all these problems. And one of the problems was when he brought them out of Egypt and he took them to Mount Sinai, he went up on the mountain to talk to God to get God's teachings. And when he did, everything broke loose. They started panicking. They had Aaron, his brother, who was the priest, collect up all their gold throw it in the fire, melt it down, and create a golden calf. And then Aaron, they said, here is the God who brought you out of Egypt, Israel. And they began to worship this golden calf. Well, one of the things it shows us is they didn't really know who God was. And where did they get this golden calf? Where did they get that idea to even make a golden calf? Obviously, in Egypt. And so it means that their view of God was so shaped that they were always falling into idolatry. I mean, they had a history of it. So it means that their view of God was messed up. And they had been slaves, and you get a mentality after a while in life. It doesn't take 400 years to get that mentality either. We start getting shaped. If we have a belief about ourselves, like, I'm worthless, that will start to shape your identity and the way you see yourself. But really, our identity, how we see ourselves, comes from how we see God. So, Moses is writing or telling this story to post-Exodus Israelites to deal with their false, distorted picture of God. And thus, because of that distorted picture of God, their resulting value or view of themselves was distorted, was twisted. Very much in that day, and even now, if something was a god and you made that god mad, curses would fall upon you in their eyes. And so famines, because the river god was mad, or somebody in your family might die from a snake bite, and so you must have made the snake gods mad. Or somebody's upset with you because the gods were capricious. They were whimsical. They did whatever they wanted to, and you were forced to try to appease them. Or else they would kill you, or hurt you, or harm you. And you wanted to have their favor. So when we look at what's going on in the background here, what the author is writing to, in Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and beyond, he's writing to these people who had a really distorted view of God and a distorted view of themselves. And now we said that, so the author is going to have to not only deal with it, but he's going to have to help them understand who the real God is and who they are. When he's writing, when he's dealing with their issues, he's going to have to reveal who the real God is and who they are to this God. Because one inextricable link is the way we see God results in the way we see ourselves and others and the world around us. And so in Genesis 1, we said there was a God picture that emerged. And that God picture was of a God, first of all, he was creator, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we unpacked that a little bit and said that meant he was life giver. He was sustainer. He was planner, which means he had an intent, that is a will, in creation. When he created light, it wasn't just light he was creating, he was heading someplace, and light would only find its true meaning in life. Because he's the life giver, he is about life. Furthermore, as we study this passage, we see the value of creation to God is what? How valuable is creation to God? Well, it's everything it was about, right? It's all encompassing for God. That is, all his energy and effort is about creation because he's about life. It's a different way to see God. Further, when you look at the order of creation, humans, when they come, we said they are priceless treasures to God.
Reminds me of Ephesians where it says that we are God's lyric.
We are God's,
Poema.
His work. Oh, his poem.
It's poema, the word is poema.
We are, in fact, one of the things that we find out is that when we get to Jesus, we see just how important we are to God. He would risk everything for us. And that's not new. That wasn't a secondary action. That was out of who God is, as life giver, as sustainer. As all this was done because he is the lover of life. Remember, we're talking about what's the identity of God. Anything in creation, he was the value giver. And in value giving, he said, this is good. After he made it, that's a value statement by God about his creation. And so, as we understand this picture of God, in Genesis 1, we see the value of humanity emerge. And in that value of humanity, there is no measure for it. He made us in his image and likeness. Imagine, he could search the universe and could not find anything greater to make us in. It means he sees us through the way he sees himself. And he treasures us that way. Not only did he make us in his image and likeness, but the word image also means a representative part. So to be a representative part of something, an image, if you take a picture or an image of something and you project it, it shows you a representation of what that thing is. So we were created to be a representative part of God to creation. Because another thing he did was, he gave humanity dominion. Dominion over what?
Over the lower creatures.
Over all the works of his hands.